to join. I want to talk about some of the topics that we will be discussing in the coming weeks and months even. So if you are watching live, go ahead and hit a wave emoticon or something else. Let Janessa and I know that you're here. Janessa is going to be watching the live stream so that if there are any questions, we're making sure that we are answering those. And the topics that we have coming up this week, or excuse me, in the coming weeks, I'm really excited about. Next week, we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, specifically what that is, how we can work to better identify it in our own selves, what we can do to overcome it, and then how we can help other people that we are leading or working with or friends with to do the same, right? It's incredibly powerful when we have the ability to identify and work on something within ourselves. And then it's even more impactful when we're able to help others with it. So next week, talking about imposter syndrome, I'm really, really excited about and can't wait. If there are any specific questions regarding imposter syndrome, go ahead and send them in so that I can be making sure that I address them in the call next week. Likewise, similar to these calls, we'll have the video available afterwards. So if anybody has any questions following that discussion, you can ask them, at your leisure, either in the group or just over email to us. So next week, we're talking about imposter syndrome. And then we're going to be talking about mid-year planning because believe it or not, it will be the middle of May soon, at which point you'll be wanting to gear up to plan for your 6 months in, the start of June, you're 6 months into 2021. How far have you come? Where do you want to go? What are you doing next? Making sure that you're keeping any and all momentum that you had at the beginning of 2021, and perhaps even capitalizing on the growth that you've had so far and continuing to go. So that's what we'll be doing after imposter syndrome. And then, we're well into May. By that point, we're going to do a 4-part series on power. And that is part of a larger, more exciting announcement that I have coming. So apart from what that larger, more exciting announcement is, are there any questions for me about the coming sessions before we get started? No questions yet? All right. Well, I am so excited to be back here. I, have missed you all, those that were in the last Leading with Your Whole Self workshop. It was a terrific workshop. And then we take a week of rest and now we're back with our weekly Wednesday trainings. So I'm super excited to be here. And we will go ahead and get started. It's just a little afternoon Pacific time. Janessa, you'll keep me posted on any questions that come in over the Facebook group. And we are talking today about holding individuals accountable. Now, holding individuals accountable is different than holding teams accountable. Holding individuals accountable can come up, though, in many different ways. It can come up when you are working on a team or perhaps even leading a team, and somebody on the team is maybe not delivering or not delivering the quality with which you expect and with which the team needs. It may come up when you have a direct report and you are finding that they're not meeting their expectations. It could even come up between you and your manager. You may be working with a leader that you actually need to hold accountable for what they are committing to do for you. So there are a number of different ways in which we need to hold others accountable. And it's something that can feel uncomfortable. And so that leads me to the very first thing that I like to talk about when I talk about holding people accountable. And that is that clear is kind. It's a critical thing to remember when you're thinking to yourself, do I want to give that person feedback on this? Do I want to go through the angst or any discomfort of having a tough conversation with them? Or do I instead just not want to have that conversation? Well, if you think about it in the context of clear is kind, if you're not having that conversation, you are not being clear with them. You are not letting them know that they are not meeting expectations or that a deliverable being late is unacceptable or whatever the issue is that you need to hold that person accountable for, if you are not sharing the issue with them, then that's not kind, right? And if it gets to a point where then you have to take some sort of action and they have not been given feedback and a chance to improve, if you just think about the downstream activities that happen, that there's no way kindness in that action of not taking the time to really dig deep and to understand where they are and to help them bridge that gap from wherever they are right now to where they would be performing at the level in which you expect. It seems so simple to say that clear is kind, but it can get really muddy because there are feelings involved, and how we work with one another and how we act and action others requires us to dig deep and to really understand what our motives are, how we're communicating, and if we're uncomfortable communicating, working on that so that we can get better at it. I'm going to take a pause, go on mute, and just cough for a second and ask if anybody has any questions. Sorry, excuse me. Are there any questions about number one premise, clear is kind?
I don't have a question on that. This is Lisa. Hi. I just want to make sure I'm in the right meeting.
Yeah, sure. So we're talking about holding individuals accountable today.
Awesome. Sorry, I was in a different, I got, the previous meeting was late. That's what I'm trying to say.
No worries.
I was
yes.
jumping in. I was like, okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. We're talking about holding individuals accountable. I gave a brief recap at the beginning of what we've got coming up and why we're talking about certain things. And then I just launched right in. And so today we're talking about holding individuals accountable. Again, if you're watching the stream later, hit hashtag replay so that we know you were here and we can make sure to follow up with any questions. So the first premise with holding individuals accountable is clear is kind. If you are not giving feedback that you know you should be giving, that's unkind. And if you're giving it in any way that's muddy, maybe you haven't thought through and practiced how to give the feedback that you want, that also can be unkind. Kindness does not mean that we can't or shouldn't have tough conversations. Tough conversations are just what they are. They're tough. Sometimes they're a little crunchy. Sometimes we're uncomfortable and then our employee or our team member becomes uncomfortable. And that's okay. What's not okay is to not have the conversation. You want to be as human as possible. You want to be as empathetic as possible. The more that you can, when you're giving feedback about holding someone accountable, holding an individual accountable, the more that you can understand where they're coming from, the better a conversation you will have. But that doesn't mean that it is not possibly an uncomfortable conversation. So I just want to be completely clear that kindness is it doesn't mean not having uncomfortable conversations, but to be clear is to be kind, to be unclear is to be unkind. So when you have to hold someone accountable, when you have to have any sort of feedback conversation, you want to make sure you're being as clear as possible. So that then leads me into asking everyone if they feel as though they haven't been clear, and I'm just calling up a slide that I'm actually using next week in a presentation, but I want to make sure I just show you this. If you haven't been very clear in your conversation, think about why. Think about what type of noise you may have put forward in the conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and share this and just put it on slide presentation. Hopefully you can see that. Make sure it's on slide. Are you seeing a slide that talks about types of noise?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Wonderful. I'm just going to move everybody to the other screen. So this is as I mentioned, it's a part of a presentation I'm giving next week for Magi on communication in project management. But when I was thinking about how to be clear and how we want to make sure that we are clear, I wanted to share types of noise that can come in when we're communicating. And sometimes there's syntactical noise. So that's a mistake. You know, if we use the wrong word, or if we have any grammar and spelling errors, that can confuse people, especially if it's in, in grammar and spelling. If it's in a written format, that can confuse people, and that can be a noise that muddies the message. The more apparent to me type of noise in communicating feedback and holding individuals accountable is semantic noise. When we use a word that maybe is a softened word of the word that we would like to use to reflect what the person has provided, the accountability that you're trying to get. If we are not very clear and deliberate in the words that we choose to use to give that feedback, that can cause noise and lack of certainty. And also overload. Sometimes there's too much information provided. And it's critical that we look at these three types of noise, both when we're giving feedback and holding people accountable, and more importantly, when we were outlining what they were accountable for. So taking that step back, if you're in a situation where you need to give somebody feedback because you need to hold them accountable, and you know that to be clear is to be kind, the more frequently you're giving feedback, the easier it is for others around you to adapt. And then you take a step back and you think, how did I communicate what needed to get done? Was there any sort of noise in this communication? Where could I have improved on that? And likewise, how open is my door for them to ask questions? Could they have come to me and said, I don't understand what you're asking for. You keep saying you want this, and I don't even know what this is. How open are you to them asking you questions? So those are the things that we need to think about when we're examining our own role in holding individuals accountable. The good news about this is that it gives us a chance to continue to grow and to refine and get better at both outlining expectations and then holding individuals accountable. Any questions about that? Okay. No questions. All right, then I'm going to go right into the third thing that I wanted to talk about. And once again, I'm going to share my slides. So I'll share my screen. Excuse me. So I want to make sure that everybody can see this. And let's just go back. Can everybody see a skill will tool introduction? No.
I don't see the screen.
Sorry. Okay, hang on a second. Let's try that again.
Yes.
Yes, awesome. All right. And now I want it to be full screen though. How's that? Do you see a full screen of skill will tool introduction?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So when you need to hold individuals accountable, it's first important that you remember to be clear is to be kind. So you need to take action. You need to make sure that you are clearly communicating how you're holding them accountable and backtracking and making sure that you were doing everything you could to be as clear in what you wanted to communicate to them from the very beginning. This tool is a tool that allows you to simply identify where they are on what we call the skill will matrix. And it's a really simple tool. And that is one of its pros. It's something that it's easy for you to keep both, to have an idea of where team members are, direct reports. It's something that can very easily be implemented by you, although it does have some limitations. Number one is that it's subjective, especially the will part. And it's a snapshot in time. So you need to regularly assess that. And people progress and move about on the skill will matrix quite frequently. It also needs to be considered for context specifics. So if you have somebody that has a job description that is quite broad, and you know that they're really good in a small part of it, but not in 90% of it, that's going to generalize on here and where they end up on this skill will matrix, but you might need to acknowledge that for certain things, they actually have incredibly high skill. So those are some of the cons about this tool. And the easiest way for me to talk about this tool is to give some examples. So on the x-axis here, if you will, I don't know, can you all see my cursor moving back and forth?
I don't.
No,
I
you
see the
don't.
slide.
You just see the slide. Okay, that's a
Yeah.
shame. All right. Well, on this x-axis where it says low skill, high skill. Uh-oh, this is not correct. Shoot, I'm sorry. Let me just do a quick edit here. This should be low will. The joy of live, right? All right. This will be a lot clearer now. Which PowerPoint are you ladies seeing?
Skill will tool introduction.
Good, good,
one.
good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Mhm.
All right, here we go. You see it now big?
Yes.
All right, okay. So on the x-axis, we have will, low will, high will. And that's basically how much somebody is willing to do something, how excited they are about it, how motivated they are about it. And on the y-axis here, we have skill. Now, oh gosh, this is not good. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I had these slides made up and I didn't double check them. I had them made up in new formatting and I didn't double check them ahead of time because I was racing. So if we just look at all right, if we look at will here and we look at skill on the y-axis. All right, you know what? I'm confusing myself in my head. So we're going to cancel the skill will. I want to talk about the skill will, and I'm not going to use slides right now, and I will get this out to you after. So I'm very sorry about that. I needed to check that ahead of time, and I didn't. So my sincerest apologies. Look for that to come out after. Basically, the skill will matrix. You have on one level a will, on another a skill. I think it's actually skill on the x-axis, will on the y. And you plot people based on where they are in their skill set and their willingness and ability and excitement and motivation about the job. So that's where I was saying it can be subjective. It can be subjective that, you know, you think they're not motivated about their job, but they actually feel that they are. Or they, you know, they might just not have an overall high level of excitement. It's not coming across that way. But, and you would look to see it as a level of excitement that you're not seeing. Or you might have a very accurate assessment of their will. And by evaluating their skill at a job and their will, their willingness to do it, you will then be able to understand what's best. And that's where I couldn't quickly, especially on the spot, and wow, that was a terrible job on my part. I couldn't quickly make sure that everything was working because where they fall on one of those four quadrants dictates how you would lay out future expectations. So for example, somebody with low skill but high will. So this might be somebody that's newer to the job, maybe somebody that's new to this type of an organization, maybe somebody fresh out of school who is now in your organization and is eager, but really lacks skill. You would evaluate that person as having low skill, but high will. And so you would be looking to direct them. You would be helping them basically to build that skill set. Now, if you have somebody that has a very high skill, but perhaps they have a low will, maybe they've been burnt out for the past couple of weeks, or maybe, you know, they have become disenchanted with their job for whatever reason. So they have a very high skill. They know how to do the job. They can do it well, but they have a low will. You would instead focus what you are working with and how you are looking to lay out future expectations with them by trying to engage them, trying to figure out what you can do to help them to raise their skill and their will in your organization. So, you know, you'd be looking perhaps at scaling them back if they've had a really heavy workload, but giving them something that excites them. You know, you don't want to scale them back and just give them the parts of the job that they don't like. That's not a way that you're going to get them to engage as you outline and lay objectives for where you want them to go so that you can hold them accountable. The upper right-hand quadrant, and again, I'll double check the PowerPoint. I wanted to send it out to everybody anyway, because I want this to be a tool that you can really easily use. The upper right-hand quadrant, high skill, high will, those are your top performers. And you may have somebody in that upper right-hand quadrant that has high skill, high will, and then gets promoted. And now they're in a new job where they probably still have a lot of high will, right? They're really excited about this, but the landscape of what they're doing has changed. And maybe, most likely, their skill level and their skill ability in that new job has gone down. So you're going to need to move them. And that's where this is not a one and done thing. It's a type of thing that you can continuously look towards and update. And when you are holding individuals accountable, you want to understand where they are on the skill will matrix so that you can then best customize your messaging to them about how you are looking to outline future expectations and thus then hold individuals accountable and help them to deliver and to continue to embody their higher selves. So I know I did a really terrible job of showing the PowerPoint. So I'm going to look at that, make sure it's correct, send it out. There's a bunch of examples in the PowerPoint that I send you. And so again, you'll want to read through those notes and just make sure that they all make sense. And then there's even a slide there that you can just take and save so that you can play around with it, whether these are people that directly report to you, if they're team members. It's fine to think about people coming from other functional areas and trying to assess what their skill and will is in that functional area. If anything, that helps you to understand where they're coming from. It helps you to empathize with what support they may or may not be getting from their direct line management and how they're looking to grow. And it then helps you to best customize your feedback so that you can hold people accountable. It's critical. And so often I see women just assuming work that others in their teams or others that report into them need to get done because it's not being done at the level of detail that they need or at the actual work product level. So instead of having these tough conversations, people are taking on additional workload, and that leads to burnout. That is not okay. That is not something that's sustainable for any of us. We need to make sure that the teams that we're building, the people that are reporting into us, that we are openly and actively talking about and holding individuals accountable for what they need to contribute. Any questions on that?
I think it's a really good perspective. Yeah, to look at it from that, point of view.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I mean, it's one of the number one causes that I'm seeing of burnout is that people just keep taking on other people's work. Sometimes management's forcing it on you, but more often than not, we take it on because we want our teams, our products, whatever we're working on to succeed. And when others aren't doing it at the level that we want, or we aren't actively able to get them there, we're instead taking on the work, and that will just burn you out. And burnout is not something we're doing in 2021. We're all done with that, okay? All right, let me fix these slides. Yeah, Lisa.
Just a quick question. I was just curious, and I don't know whether you have any specific data, but do you think that that's gender specific? In other words, do you think that women just naturally tend to do that more than men, or?
I don't have
I don't
any
know.
data. No, it's a great question.
Okay.
I don't have any data on it. I have a hunch, and that's all it is. And I think it's worth us all exploring and seeing if there's any data out there. I haven't been able to find anything really easily, but I have a hunch that men are more comfortable giving feedback and holding others accountable. Now, I'm not saying that they do it better. I'm not saying any of that, but I'm just saying that I have a hunch that men tend to be in general, and of course these are broad generalities, right? So there's always variation, but men are in general more comfortable doing that. Women are less comfortable doing it. We are more inclined to just make sure everybody's happy working around us. You know, we don't want to rock the boat. And as a result, we just do the work ourselves. We take that shit on. And that's where it's so important that we learn and we get comfortable being uncomfortable, if that's what it takes, because not only do we then help others, we are protecting ourselves. We're helping our teams, our organizations to be stronger, and we're taking care of ourselves. We're making sure we're not taking on that work. And honestly, anybody that is thoughtful about the feedback they're giving, making sure that they're being clear, making sure that, oh, you know what, in hindsight, what I communicated to you was really unclear. And I should have said this. Well, now not only did you help that person to accomplish what they need to accomplish, you've also gotten better and clearer about your own communication. Going through those tough conversations, thinking about what part we ourselves play in it, and then giving regular feedback just makes teams and organizations so much stronger.
Yeah, totally agree. And I have that kind of experience, you know, if you try to not hurt somebody's feelings and you kind of tiptoe around the actual message, it actually causes a lot more problems. It also causes people to, because it's unclear that, and they, you know, don't want to think of the worst case scenario, then it gives them false hopes and things just keeps going the same, you know. Yeah, so I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, I like to say, and this is where, you know, I tend to swear, right? But nobody likes to go to work and say, or nobody goes to work and says, like, I can't wait to do a shitty job today. Nobody does that, right? Sometimes people are burnt out and they're just stressed and they're exhausted, but nobody wants to just go deliver crap. Like, nobody wants to do that. We want to feel fulfilled in what we're doing. So how can we as leaders help others feel fulfilled? Where are we culpable in confusion or, you know, any sort of, you know, muddiness of the water, right? And then to your point, Elisa, when we try and soften the message too much, it's important that we're delivering it with empathy. But if we're not clear, if we, instead of saying, that wasn't what I needed, if instead we say, that was okay, well, then that's a very different message than that wasn't what I needed, right? And obviously your specific feedback will be driven by what the situation is, and the more frequently we practice talking about that, and even perhaps talking about that with our manager. I mentioned you know, holding our managers or our leaders accountable is important too. You know, I have been in situations where I've had to say to my direct leadership, you know, hey, we talked about doing it this way, and then that message went out to the group. Can you help me understand why we did it that way or why you sent that email? You know, asking, can you help me understand, helps me to get in that person's head, to understand where they're coming from. And, you know, that was a really fresh situation, right, that I'm reflecting on now. That person was like, oh, well, I just thought it would be easier if I sent the email. And I was like, well, when you sent the email, I was giving a different message to this team. And then our waters, you know, our messages conflicted, and that made things really confusing. And then it made a lot more work. And I was able to talk in a constructive manner to somebody that, you know, was at a senior level position to me about how we had left a meeting with a decision and then they decided to make a new one without telling me, and how that messed up communication for the rest of the teams. So it's possible. And the more curious we are about why someone's doing something, why they thought that was a good work product, the more curious we are, and I mean truly curious. We all smell bullshit, right? If you're like, why did you do that way? Like, that doesn't sound like you're really curious. It sounds like you just want to know why I gave you crap. And honestly, I didn't mean to give you crap. I just didn't understand. If you're like, why did you tell me why you thought this was ready? Like, and you're really curious. You want to know where they're coming from. You're going to learn a lot more, and you're going to build those relationships. All right, ladies, I'm sorry for the, I'll call them just preparation challenges, and I vow to do better next time. If you've got any questions, send them to me. I will be sending everybody that's in this call a copy of the correct slide deck. And as well, if you've got any questions, once you look at it, let me know. It's a great, quick tool to use. If you don't have the slide deck in front of you, you can just like sketch it on a piece of paper and just be like, all right, where do I think they are? Maybe even on this particular topic in the skill will matrix. Maybe this is just a topic or a aspect of their job that they need to be growing on. But, you know, it's just different ways of looking at things that allows us better chances of communicating in an effective manner.
Thanks so much, Tara. This has been very, very helpful.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. And we'll talk next week, as I mentioned, about imposter syndrome. Can't wait to talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.